Unlocking the shocking secrets of Leviticus, you won't believe what's inside. It happened during a silent lecture hall, shadows clinging to the corners like memories best left untouched. A professor, weathered and wise, flipped open an ancient manuscript thick with secrets. Gasps echoed. Inside, words twisted and turned like ominous figures. The pages seemed to tremble, as if alive with a pulse. Everyone could feel it, a dark electricity crackling through the air. Leviticus. Just the name sent shivers down spines. Few dared to delve into its depths, yet every hesitant glance at the pages revealed disturbing rituals and baffling commandments. Did you know Leviticus describes animal sacrifices where blood spills on the ground, soaking into the earth like dark promises? The details were nauseating, yet fascinating. The professor spoke of scapegoats and their morbid fate, leading the audience to wince together, a sea of twisted expressions. How could people accept this? Someone whispered. The question hung, heavy and chilling, gripping the lecture hall with a vice of curiosity. Whispers of sinister practices grabbed hold of the room, each person wrestling with their own thoughts, internal struggles reflected in their wide eyes, and just as the tension tightened, the lights flickered ominously. A chill whispered through the air, and a paper flew from the professor's desk, fluttering like a warning sign. Unbelievable. Was this a prank or something much worse? Silence fell again, but not for long. Nervous glances exchanged as someone finally broke it. What is going on? The unease thickened like fog, wrapping around their minds. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. Then, as whispers of panic began to stir, the lighting dimmed further, casting an eerie glow. A collective gasp echoed through the lecture hall. The professor stumbled backward, his face drained of color. Something had awakened. What had they disturbed? What secrets soared just beyond the edges of their understanding? The book trembled in the stillness, a predator lying in wait. Suddenly, doubt flooded the room. Was the past about to come crashing into the present? And the trembling question lingered, what lay beneath the surface waiting to be unleashed? The hall was filled with an anxious silence, a blanket sewn from shared fear and curiosity. Students exchanged wide-eyed glances, breaths catching in throats. The professor, normally a stalwart guide through academia, now appeared fragile, sweat beading on his forehead. Every flicker of the lights cast shadows across the room, sweeping the group deeper into uncertainty. Is this part of the lesson? Someone dared to ask, voice barely a whisper. The tension twisted, a noose tightening around them. He cleared his throat, instinctively straightening his glasses, but his hands trembled as they gripped the edges of the desk. It's just a power fluctuation, he stammered, though his eyes told a different story. But no one was convinced. Outside, the wind howled against the windows, mimicking their spiraling thoughts of dread. Was it really just a coincidence? A subtle chill turned into a gust of air rushing into the room, swirling dust and forgotten memories. It drew closer, unnerving each person in the room. A second paper sailed from the manuscript's pages, a single slip that sailed through the room like a plea for help. A student with dark curls reached out to grab it, but just as he did, the lights flickered again. It went dark for a heartbeat, then blazed back to life, revealing the room transformed. Dark figures seemed to loom at the edges, drawings of shadow that flickered against the stark walls. What did we do? Someone gasped, shrinking back in their seat. I don't think we're alone, another student murmured, awareness creeping up her spine. The atmosphere was electric, the air thick with a sense of impending doom. The book seemed to breathe, its pages turning as if pushed by an unseen force, whispering forgotten incantations that sent shivers down their spines. the professor stepped forward, voice quivering. "Listen, everyone, we may have disturbed something," a voice cut in, shaking with revelation. Eyes darted around the room. The dark whispers intensified, wrapping around them like a tightening coil. Suddenly, the manuscript slammed shut, the sound a thunderclap in their ears that sent heart rates racing. The noises from outside faded as though the world had slowed down, imprisoned in moments of fear. On the cover, the word Leviticus glimmered ominously, its silver lettering almost mocking. "Open it!" someone cried, defiance mingling with terror. "No. We don't know what's inside. We can't." The professor shot back, the desperation in his voice elevating the unease. "Isn't that the point?" Another student challenged, desperation threading through the group, yet, their confrontation barely masked their palpable anxiety. The book thrummed, beckoning with a dangerous allure. Hesitation gave way to a primal instinct, and all at once, a group of students surged forward, hands reaching toward the book. As they fought over the manuscript, the lights flickered erratically, and the air thickened with an ancient energy. They whispered secrets, words they could barely understand yet felt all too alive. In the chaos, a piercing scream erupted from the back of the room. Eyes turned wildly to see a figure cloaked in shadow rising from the floor, merging with the darkness. Heartbeats echoed like drumbeats celebrating impending doom. What had emerged, they couldn't comprehend. The book had opened a door, and now something was slipping through. And then, as quickly as it began, the figure vanished, leaving a heavy silence that was not only haunting but heavy with questions. What did they just unleash? With the very fabric of reality hanging in the balance, the students knew this was only the beginning. The air was thick, as if it had been soaked in the dread pulsating through the room. The students stood frozen, like deer caught in the headlights of a speeding car. Eyes wide, they exchanged panicked glances, each one searching for answers that scattered like ashes on the wind. "Did you see that?" one of them whispered, voice trembling. It was like it was alive. Fear dripped from every word, binding them together in a spiral of terror. The professor, usually composed, looked out at his class with eyes that held the weight of 1,000 warnings. "We need to stay calm," he urged, his tone shaky. "We need to think rationally." But the quiver in his voice betrayed him. Another gust of wind whipped through the room, rattling the windows, as if something outside wished to join their fractured reality. A chill gripped their hearts, and panic spread within the confines of their minds. Several students stepped backward, some clutching their desks for support. "Rational? There's nothing rational about a girl's voice trailed off, her gaze falling back on the manuscript that now glowed ominously on the desk. It pulsed almost like a heartbeat, a steady thrum that resonated with something buried deep within them. Desperate to understand, a brave soul grasped the edge of the book. With a swift motion, he pulled it towards him. "If we don't open it, how will we know?" he declared. Defiance lit up his eyes, but it was laced with a flickering spark of fear. Their blood ran cold as utter darkness enveloped everything for a brief second. It felt like being pulled into a void, an abyss of nothingness before the world re-emerged, bright and sharp, but with an unmistakably sinister glow. The cover of the book began to lift slightly on its own, revealing pages that seemed to shiver in anticipation. "Stop!" shouted the professor, panic breaking through his authoritative demeanor. "You don't know the consequences." In that moment, a collective decision was made. Fear overrode caution. Students surged forward, a chaotic herd trampling under the weight of their adrenaline and curiosity. They could sense the abyss within the pages, a swirling darkness that called to their deepest secrets. As they fumbled with the tome, the lights above flickered violently, casting shadows that danced in unnatural figures against the walls. Each flicker revealed glimpses of grotesque, nightmarish forms lurking just beyond their perception. Murmurs of horror spread quickly as ideas crept into their minds. Was this book more than just a collection of words? And then, without warning, the lights cut out completely. A suffocating darkness blanketed the classroom. The students gasped, hands feeling around for anything familiar, dread so thick it coated their throats. A loud, raspy whisper drifted through the air, the words forming an incomprehensible chant. "Did you hear that?" A voice cracked through the dark, fear coiling around it. "What is happening?" Just then, the emergency lights flickered on, revealing their own terrified faces, pale and wide-eyed. The manuscript lay open on the desk, its pages now swirling in a frenzied dance of shadows. The ghostly whispers amplified, a captivated audience, the book's secrets hanging tantalizingly close, yet dangerously out of reach. Each student could feel the weight of their breaths quicken, racing toward an unknown fate. "Close it!" shouted someone in terror, a tremor sweeping through the group again, but it was too late. A vision shattered the darkness. Images of the past, obscure and primal, exploded before their eyes. Shadows danced against the walls, weaving ancient tales of dread and despair. They realized in that blinding moment, they had opened something they could never comprehend. And somewhere beyond the veil, something was eagerly waiting, watching them. What would emerge from the depths? And would they survive the answers waiting in the folds of that haunted manuscript? Panic gripped the room, thick and suffocating, as the students leaned into the flickering light, each one fighting the urge to flee. The book's pages whipped madly like flags in a storm, exposing glimpses of faded words arranged in alien patterns. They felt a magnetic pull, an insistent beckoning that stirred a dark curiosity within, making the room spin. "Don't let it take you." The professor's voice trembled, struggling to cut through the chaos. He stepped forward, but the weight of dread anchored him in place. Desperation edged his tone, his usual authority crumbling. "We need to close that book." The students, entranced, barely acknowledged his plea, eyes glued to the swirling pages. Then, from the depths of the darkness, a low growl emanated, deep and resonant, reverberating in their bones. It was like the sound of an ancient beast awakening, stirring something primal in their chests. Fear tentacles laced through their minds, squeezing tighter with each beat of their hearts. I can't look away," murmured a girl near the front, her voice blending with the echoes of dread. She took a hesitant step toward the desk, shivering as if the very air had turned to ice. The students exchanged glances, each pulse of the manuscript's light reflecting the fear that danced in their eyes. They could feel it now. The darkness was thickening, a palpable entity inching closer. A boy, shaking, reached toward the manuscript, his fingers brushing against the parchment. As soon as he did, the room erupted. Screams echoed against the walls, mingling with a cacophony of whispers that swelled in intensity until it felt like the very air was charged with electricity. "Close it! Close it now!" shouted another, panic surging through him. But the words fell flat, lost against the otherworldly sounds, swallowed by the flood of terror crashing against their group. And then, it happened. The manuscript flared with a blinding light as the growling crescendo reached a peak. It felt as if the book was inhaling their fear, feeding off of their dread, and the students were caught in a riptide of overwhelming sensations. The lights overhead shattered, plunging them into pitch-black chaos once again. They huddled closer, hearts racing, a jumble of breaths and whimpers echoing in the void. "Where did it go?" someone whispered, their voice sharp with panic. "What is happening?" Each heartbeat felt like a countdown, their instincts screamed to flee, yet an unseen force locked them in place. Then, the emergency lights flicked back on, revealing a scene etched in horror. The manuscript was gone, but symbols had burned themselves into the desk beneath, glowing with a dark radiance that seeped into the students' minds. Each symbol, a window into terror, pulsed with an ancient knowledge. The professor staggered back, eyes wide in a mix of shock and fear. "We've unleashed something we can't control," he breathed, horror coursing through him as he grasped the implications of what they'd done. "What we saw, it's not just a book. It's a doorway." The students stood frozen, the weight of that realization crashing down like a sack of bricks. They exchanged looks, some in disbelief, others in despair. Outside, an unearthly wind howled, echoing like a call to arms just beyond their reach. "What if it finds us?" a girl sobbed, tightening her grip on a friend's arm. What if? Before she could finish, the lights flickered again, and a murky figure began to materialize in the corner of the room, shrouded in shadow, its eyes glowing like burning coals. The students gasped collectively, the air heavy with a suffocating dread. What will we unleash next? One voice trembled in the hubbub. They all knew deep down, the worst was yet to come. The figure in the corner took shape, slowly emerging from the darkness. It seemed to shimmer, the flickering lights casting odd shadows that danced along the walls. Fear swept through the room like a wildfire, igniting every instinct to run, yet they remained paralyzed, trapped in a web of terror. "Get back!" shouted the professor, his voice cracking as he edged away from the encroaching specter. Yet retreat was impossible, the shadows twisted behind him while the entity coalesced in front, blocking any escape. The students followed his gaze, wide-eyed, unable to look away from those glowing eyes. They felt as if the world had narrowed to that singular moment, the thundering silence interrupted only by their gasping breaths. Then the murky figure spoke, its voice a low whisper, smooth yet full of malice. "You sought knowledge, and knowledge has its price." Each word slithered into their ears, wrapping around their minds like a constrictor snake. A boy in the back, clenching his fists, yelled, "What do you want from us?" His tone reflected a mix of defiance and sheer fear, an emotion that tightened in his throat like a choking vine. The figure only laughed, a sound that echoed with a haunting melody. "The paths you've chosen lead to darkness. But you'll see, oh, you will see." With each syllable, the room seemed to dim, shadows thickening like fog, encasing them in a nightmarish cocoon. The students huddled together, backs pressed against desks, faces painted with horror and anguish. A girl broke down and cried, the sound sharp and raw, "What does that mean? We didn't want this." As if in response, the glowing symbols on the desk pulsed more fiercely, their eerie light flooding the room with a sickly glow. The professor stumbled back further, no longer able to maintain his stoic facade, his eyes wild with realization. "We need to leave this place, we need to," but his words were swallowed by an ear-splitting crack. A jolt of energy surged through the air, forcing them all to clutch their heads, feeling as if the walls themselves were closing in. The symbols flared, casting flickering shadows that seemed to writhe and twist, warning them of an impending doom. "What if it's already too late?" a voice murmured, filled with despair. The question hung in the air like a heavy fog, each student experiencing that sinking feeling in their gut. The sense of fate tightening around them was unbearable, and then, with a deafening crash, the entity lunged forward, shattering the fragile barrier that separated them from the truth. As its form swept into the light, a cascade of images flooded their minds, terrifying visions of a world corrupted by the very knowledge they had foolishly sought. Screeches resonated from the students, panic ensued. They stumbled over each other in a frantic rush toward the door, but the exit felt miles away, coated in a thick veil of dread. "Don't just stand there," the professor shouted, desperation lacing his words. "Run!" Yet, they could barely move, their feet glued to the floor by a force far stronger than their will. Suddenly, that strange energy pulsed around them, gathering with a malicious intent. The growl began again, low and rumbling, a sound that promised chaos and destruction. In that heart-stopping moment, the specter whispered again, its voice echoing in the recesses of their minds. "You may escape, but the door of knowledge can't be closed so easily." Just when it felt like their hearts might explode from fear, everything shifted again. The lights flickered violently, and darkness enveloped them once more. What would come next? Would the shadows claim them? Or would they discover the strength hidden deep within to confront the truth and fight back? The answer loomed in the dark, a new terror waiting just out of sight. Panic clawed at them, a raw, clawing sensation that cut deeper than any blade. As the darkness thickened, muffling their cries and drowning their thoughts, the professor grasped at the chaotic energy swirling through them. An instinct kicked in, survival took precedence. "Focus on my voice," he shouted, though his own heart raced like a trapped animal. "We have to break the hold it has on us. We can't." A girl wailed, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I can't move." The entity loomed closer, its form now a nightmarish collage of shadows and menace, each trembling detail magnified by their own fear. Its glowing eyes pierced through the darkness, promising eternal torment. Something primal begged them to accept defeat, to yield. Think. There must be something, the professor urged. His mind raced, trying to drown out the spectre-esque laughter that echoed like bells of doom. He struggled to recall any ancient wisdom that could counter this evil presence. Suddenly, the pulsing symbols on the desk exploded with light, bathing the room in a blinding brilliance that momentarily shielded them from their dread. The air crackled with electricity, and hope flickered feebly within the confines of fear. Grab onto that light. The professor shouted above the noise, desperation tightening his voice. The students rallied instinctively towards the glowing symbols, letting their instincts guide them past the instinct to flee. With a powerful jolt, the energy surged, and the figure hissed, recoiling. The malevolence reverberated through the air, momentarily wavering under the intense brightness. They felt a pull, a connection to something greater, something ancient. Hold on to it. One student yelled, latching onto the desk with trembling hands. The others followed suit, their unity providing fragile strength against the encroaching darkness. The spectre writhed, its laughter shifting to furious snarls. You think you can avoid the price? The cost is infinite, and you have already begun to pay. But it was now their turn. The symbols pulsed with thundering clarity, revealing images of ancient texts and lines of forgotten languages. The students shared stolen glances, realization dawning with every flicker of the glow. They understood they were not just fighting for escape, they were battling the very knowledge that had chained them. Together. The professor urged as the glow intensified. We can harness it. With trembling voices, they began to chant the symbols, breaking the barrier through incantation. Words spilled from their lips, filled with determination, untangling the threads of dread that bound them. In that moment, the entity screeched in primal fury, a sound that rattled the very foundation of the room. You think you are powerful? You know nothing of the consequences. The chaos exploded, light bursting forth like a supernova. Just as they believed they had gained control, the ground quaked beneath them, shifting like an earthquake, threatening to swallow them whole. With a final clash, the energy clashed, sending a shock wave through every being in the room, and then, silence. All at once, the oppressive weight that had pressed against their souls vanished. The glow faded, leaving them panting in darkness, breathless but alive. Is it over? One student croaked, voice barely above a whisper. I don't know, the professor replied, fear pooling within him again. The flickering lights returned cautiously, unlike before. They revealed the remnants of their chaotic battleground. But among the debris, the whispers returned, a chorus of warnings that made their skin crawl. Knowledge has its price, they had escaped for now. But as the entity's words echoed around them, questions lingered in the air. What had they really unleashed? What other horrors might arise from their reckless pursuit of truth? They quickly gathered themselves, ready to confront whatever came next. Then, a dark shadow flickered just beyond the edge of the light. Look! Someone gasped, as more glimmering figures began to coalesce in the half-light. In their hearts, they knew this was just the beginning. What other unseen terrors awaited them? And would they be strong enough to face them? A thick silence enveloped the room, the air heavy with a strange mixture of fear and uncertainty. The flickering shadows danced along the walls, and for a moment, no one dared to breathe. They stood together, backs pressed against the remnants of the desk, heartbeats echoing in their ears. Once again, the dark figure retreated, but it didn't vanish completely. It coiled at the fringes of their sight, its glowing eyes locked onto them, watching, always watching. What are they? A boy stammered, pointing shakily at the gleaming figures forming in the dim light. They shimmered, their shapes flickering like flames caught in the wind. The light was cool yet unnerving, like a specter of retroactively anticipated doom. No one has ever come back from this. The girl who had cried out earlier sobbed, her eyes wide and glassy. It's a trap. It wants us to come closer. The professor rushed to regain control, his own panic threatening to bubble over. "We can't let fear dominate us." But just as his words reached their ears, a chilling breeze swept through the room, rustling the pages of the scattered books like whispers, each murmur an echo of the secrets they had unwittingly unleashed. Suddenly, one of the glimmering figures broke free from the shadows. Tall and draped in spectral light, it moved with a grace that was both mesmerizing and horrifying. It bore a face marked by sorrow, sorrow that every one of them felt deep within. That unbearable weight was no stranger. "I am one of many," it spoke, voice soft yet dire. "We were bound by the knowledge you sought. You cannot fathom the cost of what you've done." The students shifted, exchanging glances filled with unspoken questions and doubts. "Why do you want to hurt us?" The professor steadied his voice, desperation edging through, fingers twitching, searching for some form of weapon against the mounting dread. "It is not us who wish to harm," the figure said, its light flickering like a candle caught in a storm. "It is the knowledge of the ancients. It has a mind of its own, a hunger that cannot be quelled. It demands sacrifice." As if on cue, the room shuddered once more, reverberating with the haunting growl of their enemy lingering in the shadows. The professor's mind raced. Was this truly a consequence of their quest for knowledge, or was it something more sinister lurking beneath the surface? "Sacrifice? What do you mean?" a boy shouted, fear tinging his voice as the realization settled like a dark fog. "Each secret discovered feeds the dark essence," the figure explained, its features flickering like a dying star. "And it is always hungry for more. You may have escaped one grasp, but another is already at your heels." Panic surged through them as the entity shrieked, shaking the walls, whispering promises of despair. The symbols on the desk sparked back to life, pulsing wildly, as if trying to warn them, but chaos reigned. They could hear the distant echoes of tormented souls, lingering until their hearts stuttered, fearful of what was to come. "Together!" the professor shouted, grasping at the fraying strands of determination. "We harness the light. It's what brought us this far." But the shadows shifted and closed in, and the threat was real. They were standing at the edge of oblivion. Just as they began to chant again, hoping to reclaim control, a powerful gust swept through, knocking the desk aside and plunging them into a darkness thicker than before. "Stay together!" someone cried in the void. But doubt slithered into their hearts. With the flickering lights of the symbols fading, would they be able to harness that which they barely grasped? Would they face the life-altering consequences of their exploration? And then the ground beneath actually began to fracture. Wait, what is happening? The question hung in the air, unanswered. Was ultimate knowledge worth ultimate sacrifice? Would they discover the truth about the entity, or would it claim them as part of its insatiable hunger? And then, in the silence that followed, an ominous whisper curled through the air, chilling them to the core. "You already part of the story. It knows your names." The shadows twisted with a wrathful energy, each crack in the ground echoing the dark promise of the figure's words. Their hearts thundered against their ribs, and the air felt thick, almost suffocating as it swirled around them in eerie silence. They could hardly think, the weight of their plight pressed down like a leaden blanket. "Run!" someone gasped, but who could tell where the safe path was when everything felt like it was crumbling around them? But the professor held fast. "No. We can't panic. We need to stay in the light, find the symbols." His voice rang out, desperation threading through it, igniting a flicker of resolve among the group. As they stumbled around in the darkness, hands grasping hungrily for anything solid, the atmosphere shifted. The glowing figures pulsed with a rhythm of their own, casting brief flashes of light that illuminated the faces of their terrified comrades. In those fleeting moments, they could see fear etched into each expression, like a silent scream caught on the brink of utter despair. The entity said each secret feeds its hunger, the girl cried out, her own fear punctuating every word. "We have to stop it." "But how?" "In the stories, there must be a way," the professor murmured, desperation weighing on his mind. Something to before he could finish, another loud crack thundered through the room, and a raging darkness enveloped everything. It felt as if the very essence of despair had taken form, clawing and grasping at their very souls. The shadows slithered closer, pressing against their skin like icy fingers. "Please!" one of the boys shouted, his voice trembling. "We need to find a way out." The glimmering figures surged forward, each step they took reverberating like heartbeats against the fabric of reality. They surrounded the group, the air buzzing with a mix of dread and urgency. "Knowledge is powerful," said the closest figure, now appearing almost sympathetic in its luminous glow. "But its guardians demand respect. You've awakened us, yet you do not understand the depths of what you seek. To regain control, you have to relinquish something. Relinquish?" The professor interrupted, panic spiraling in his gut. "What do you want from us?" The glowing entity moved closer, its sorrowful visage amplifying the sense of foreboding that coiled in the pit of their stomachs. "A memory, a bond forged in blood, or perhaps the truth of who you are. If we have no sacrifice, you will remain prisoners in this dark tale." Each student felt the truth hit them like a brick wall. What had they unleashed? The sacrifices of others loomed above them like a silent judgment. A girl's voice broke through. "But it's not fair. We didn't know." "That's the point," the figure said softly. "Ignorance is the true enemy. You have touched knowledge, and now it draws near. Choose quickly." "Choose?" echoed the professor, his voice thick with resentment. "You can't ask us to just give something up. That's cruel." "Cruelty is a precursor to truth," the figure replied. "But, know this, you must tame the hunger of the ancients, or it will swallow you whole. Time is running out." The room continued to convulse, carving splits in the ground as if the building itself sought to tear free from the malevolent energy gripping it. "Each choice will ripple through the fabric of reality." The phantom wailed, a note of desperation mirroring their own. "Your fate is entwined, you either emerge empowered or face eternal darkness." In that moment of collective dread, each heartbeat echoed in solidarity amidst the chaos. They were tethered to each other, their fears transformed into a bond that might just save them or doom them further. With time slipping through their fingers, an unspoken understanding formed among them. Then, a moment of silence ensued. "What will you choose?" the figure whispered, its eyes brightening with an otherworldly glow. As faces turned towards one another, questioning, calculating, a hard choice loomed, one that would determine if they escape or rot in history. Suddenly, another voice broke in from the shadows, unrecognizable yet piercing. Through the tension, "What if I tell you the true price is more than you can imagine?" Fear coiled tighter around their throats as they faced the darkness threatening to consume them. Choices had never felt heavier. The shadows of their past were waiting to be unmasked, but at what cost? Panic surged through the group as that disembodied voice faded into an unsettling silence, leaving them hanging in the suffocating dark. The shadows felt alive, as if they were circling like vultures, waiting patiently for a moment of weakness. Each of them could feel the cold touch of fear wrapping around their hearts, constricting tighter with every heartbeat. "What do you mean by more?" the professor demanded, his voice hoarse. He knew it was futile, but the desperation clawed at him. He took a step forward, instinctively shielding the group while trying to project strength. "We deserve to know the truth." "Truth is rarely deserved," the voice replied, soft but dripping with contempt. "It's discovered. You have already crossed a line, now you must pay the toll." The glowing figures flickered, their expressions twisting with anticipation as if feeding off the group's dread. The professor felt the weight of the responsibility on his shoulders. Here they were, trapped in a nightmare of their own making, and he had to lead them back to the light. "Listen," he commanded, turning to his group. "We need to really think about what we be sacrificing. What each of us holds dear." Nervous glances darted around the group. Each student wrestled with their private terror. Memories surged to the surface, threatening to suffocate them, a childhood promise, a long-lost friend, a shared laughter now tainted by this blight. A girl with wide, frightened eyes took a step back. "I can't let them take my past. Her voice cracked, laden with sorrow. That's too much to lose. I'd give almost anything, another boy murmured, eyes glazed over in thought as they envisioned their worst fears, a darkness deeper than mere shadows. Almost. The girl's voice was sharp, cutting through the thick tension. What if we become something worse than what we were before? In that moment, the professor felt the shadows respond to their uncertainty. They pulsed, alive and hungry, as if sensing the cracks forming within the group's resolve. We can't let fear dictate our choices. We must face what we're willing to give up. The whispering darkness thrummed with potential energy, growing restless as they hesitated. Suddenly, the phantom reappeared, closer this time, distress etched into its glowing features. You have one last chance, it offered, urgency bleeding into its tone. Reveal your deepest fears. They are part of you, they can be offered. But secrecy breeds hunger fears. The professor echoed, dread pooling with every word. You can't be serious. To quench the darkness, the truth must be laid bare, the figure replied, an eerie calm settling over the tension. The room felt electric, charged with the weight of what they might reveal. Each student looked at one another, examining the flurry of conflicted emotions reflected on every face. Did they truly have the courage to unveil their innermost fears? Could the very act of sharing unshackle them from the shadows? I'm terrified of losing the people I love. The girl's voice trembled but rang out, breaking the silence. I can't let them take away my memories of them. I can't. Do you want to sacrifice your future for your past? The figure whispered, almost tenderly, as if trying to coax them into a choice. The chain reaction began. One by one, they started sharing, fears of abandonment, regrets, forsaken dreams. Each confession felt like a brick being lifted from their chests, but also strengthened the shadows, which writhed and sighed with oily satisfaction. Suddenly, the fabric of reality twisted again. A deep rumble echoed, shaking them to their core, and the shadows surged forward, hungry for more. Speak. Speak your truth. They clamored in a cacophony, the darkness encroaching like a tide rising to claim its prize. The air crackled with a tension they could hardly withstand. Would they brave the storm? Would they crack under the pressure? The churning abyss threatened to pull them under, and time slipped dangerously slender through their fingers. In that moment, they knew surrender was not an option. Not today. The question now hung heavy in the air. What would they uncover when the last fear was laid bare? Would the truth light their path, or plunge them deeper into darkness? The night stretched on like a dark ocean, each moment crashing down heavy upon the students, binding them together in shared dread. Their hearts thundered in frantic unison, yet a spark of determination flickered in the depths of their despair. It was raw, a visceral connection igniting between their souls like wildfire. Together. The courageous girl called, her voice rising from the shadows. Her words ignited a glimmer of hope, a reminder that they were not isolated in their fears. No, they were a collective force, each carrying the weight of their pasts yet united by the urgency of the present. I fear the truth of who I could have been, a boy confessed, the tremor in his voice emphasizing every syllable. The shadows recoiled slightly, as if prodded by each admission. Others soon followed. I'm afraid of losing control over my life. I fear being forgotten, like dust on a shelf, voiced another, a tremor lacing each word they spoke. They let their deepest scars tumble forth, and as each one did, the oppressive darkness gradually began to shift, weakening its horrid grip. The murky figure, once menacing, flickered nervously, like an ember struggling for breath. The glowing symbols on the desk pulsed twice, shimmering as if in acknowledgement. Each admission was heard somewhere far beyond their perception. Keep going. The shadows can't stand our truth. Shouted the professor, feeling a strange surge of empowerment. He could sense it, the grip of despair loosening, like a rope fraying under pressure. I fear that I will always be alone, another girl revealed, tears glistening in her eyes. Around her, others nodded, understanding etched onto their faces. Her vulnerability oddly webbed them tighter amidst the gathering chaos. With every truth brought to light, pieces of weight began to lift. They started feeling lighter, more connected even in this dreadful moment. The entity writhed at the edges of their awareness, its presence dimming as the room brightened with their unified confessions, but the darkness was cunning. It pulled at them, twisting their words, trying to sow doubt. "You think your truths will protect you?" It rumbled, voice echoing like a tempest. Yet this time, fear had transformed. Each student felt the tendrils of dread receding, no longer as solid as before. "I'm not afraid to wake up," shouted a boy, anger mixing with defiance. It stirred an echo of agreement among the group. "I refuse to be a prisoner of my own making." And then they all felt it, a rushing wave of strength igniting within them. Each confession became brighter than the last, creating a spiral of light driving against the shadows. The figures flickered back, flaring defiantly against the dark, like stars rebelling against clouds. The voice of the entity boomed, "You cannot escape the hunger. You will always pay the price." But their resolve held firm. "Let us face it." They called together, courage igniting their voices. "We are not afraid." With each powerful chant, the manuscript cast vibrant imprints of their truths into being. The very words breathed life, and soon the shadows ceased their twitching. The dark energy stilled, bound by the light born from their shared experiences. The murky figure shrieked, anguish etching its distorted features. "Your truths are your burden. And they will forever haunt you. Only if we let them." The professor rebutted, conviction blazing in his heart. The air hummed around them, fingers of light reaching deeper into the abyss, carving a path forward. Finally, they rallied around the professor, their united front igniting the dim light above, what had once been cold flickers now blazing like a beacon. It cast away the trepidation, each flicker illuminating the symbols as they began to elucidate the ancient secrets once tangled in shadows. Then came the final voice, cutting through the chaos. "I am ready to break free," a girl stated, stepping forward with resolve whose strength crackled like flames birthed anew. "I want to let fear claim my future." The room erupted in brilliance, shadows receding, fading into wisps. The manuscript swooshed back into silence, the glowing symbols collapsing in a radiant blast like fireworks cascading into the night sky. The claustrophobic air parted around them, releasing its suffocating grip, colliding against the walls now lining with echoes of long-forgotten knowledge. In the aftermath, everything shifted. They collapsed, breathing heavily, laughter intermingling with remnants of fear. The classroom glowed warm, the weight of knowledge comfortably nestled within them. They had emerged from the depths, but only on the other side of choice could they begin anew. As their hearts settled, solidarity held their hands, imprinting the lessons learned deeper than any darkness. They could feel it, a promise flourishing in their veins. Hope was no longer just shallow words, it was a living heartbeat. "Let South leave this place behind," the professor suggested, hoarse yet shaking with gratitude. "This chapter has closed, but our story continues." And one by one, they filed out of the lecture hall, leaving the darkness behind. They understood now knowledge was a burden, but so was choice. They stepped into the night, knowing they would conquer their fears, together forging the paths toward an unwritten destiny. But as they moved away, whispering hopes and farewells, a last flicker of shadow swept across the room, unnoticed. The story never truly ends. So as they laughed and journeyed forward, a feeling lingered in the air, a reminder of just how fragile the balance between light and dark can be. Now, more than ever, the call to knowledge echoed louder, stronger, a precious tether binding them to an unyielding journey ahead. You need to subscribe now. Don't wait even one more second to make sure you catch our next exclusive story. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm and help us grow. And flood the comments section below with your reactions and theories about today's climax. Let us hear what you think about the ending and what should come next. And for real, share this video with at least 5 friends who need to witness this incredible conclusion. The adventure doesn't end here. Your support helps us dive deeper into the stories that matter.